Is this saying true that goes, cold hands, warm heart? Well, I want a warm heart and warm hands. Gloves are one answer to warm your hands, but if you want fingers that are free, how about these? Hello friends, Nancy here. This pullover has extra long sleeves. I'm going to make holes in these sleeves, kind of like buttonholes, but not for buttons, for thumbs. So let's get going sewing. This jacket sleeve has thumb holes that are 2 inches long. 2 inches should work for the blue pullover too. But the jacket thumb holes are made in seams that are more toward the front of the sleeve. On the pullover, there are no seams where the holes will need to go. Leaving about 3/4 of an inch allowance on the cuff edge, I'll make the thumb holes here. I baste a buttonhole cutting line in thread that will be visible through the lightweight fusible interfacing that I will apply to the inside of the sleeve. The interfacing will help stabilize the very stretchy pullover fabric. I cover the interfacing with parchment paper, then press until the interfacing is attached securely to the sleeve. My sewing machine buttonhole attachment only makes buttonholes for buttons up to 1 inch across. So I'm going to take my cue from a bound buttonhole, but with a variation. The thumb holes that I'll make won't have lips like bound buttonholes do. Bound buttonhole lips, or welts as they're also known, are the 2 narrow strips of fabric that form the finished edge of the buttonhole. I'm curious to know, what is your favorite buttonhole method for very large buttons? Please let us know in the comments. Next steps. I cut to size a piece of fabric with similar stretch and color to the pullover. This will be the thumb hole facing, and I attach lightweight fusible interfacing to it by pressing. I pin the facing to the outside of the sleeve with the interfacing facing out. I center the facing directly over the interfacing that's attached on the inside. Next up is some hand basting. Starting with the center point of where I want my rectangle to be, I baste the facing to the sleeve in a straight 2-inch line. Then I baste the rectangular shape where I want to machine stitch. The rectangle will look like this: 2 inches on the long sides of the rectangle and 3/16 of an inch on the ends. If you are new to pivoting corners or making a rectangular opening in knit fabric, practicing on a smaller piece of similar fabric first will give you confidence when you work on your actual project. Please subscribe and don't miss a stitch. Stay up to date with all our latest content, and the best part? It's completely free. Just hit that subscribe button and join us today. On my sewing machine, I'm using this clear presser foot so I can more easily see just where the stitches are being made, particularly how the 2 long rows of stitching are progressing to make even parallel rows. The clear foot will also help with precise stitching at the corners. The center indicator on the foot will be a helpful stitching guide. I set my stitch length to 2.5. The sewing machine needle that I'm using is designed specifically for knit fabrics. This needle selection for knit and jersey fabrics comes in several sizes to a package. Lower numbers are for lighter weight fabrics, and higher numbers are for medium weight fabrics. For my pullover fabric, I'm using an 80/12 needle. I start sewing the rectangle at the midpoint on the long side, using the basting and the center point of my presser foot as my guides. I start with a few back stitches, then stitch forward slow enough to maintain a straight line. When I am 1 stitch away from the corner, I use the hand wheel to lower the needle into the fabric for the corner stitch. With the needle down and holding the fabric, I lift the presser foot lever and rotate the fabric 90 degrees to face the basting stitches on the short end of the rectangle. I lower the presser foot and stitch 2 or 3 stitches. The last stitch on this end row should also be done by hand, lowering the needle into place at the pivot point of the corner. I continue this method for each corner. When I reach the starting point, I overlap the last few stitches to reinforce them and then use a back stitch to secure the seam. Inside of my machine stitched rectangle, I will cut an opening that looks like this. I start by folding the fabric over and lining up the stitching. I take a sharp pair of scissors or snips and cut into the folded fabric. I cut the very center line of the opening until I'm about 1/4 of an inch away from the end stitching. Then I make 2 diagonal cuts, one to each corner of the rectangle. Then I repeat on the other side of the rectangle, cutting very close to the corner, but not cutting the stitching. I turn the facing to the inside of the sleeve. I turn the sleeve inside out and press the facing down. I'm happy with how the rectangle shape has turned out, so I will take out the black basting stitches now. Next, I baste the seam allowances to the facing to prevent the facing from peeking out on the sleeves right side when I top stitch. I press again. I use plenty of pins to secure the facing to the sleeve for top stitching. I'll use the left side of the presser foot as a guide for where the edge of my fabric should be. I'll continue to use the center point of the foot as the guide for my stitches. The top stitching will be about 1/8 of an inch in from the edge of the fabric. I'll use the same beginning and ending methods to stitch and the same corner pivoting method as previously to complete the top stitching. I'm satisfied with the top stitching. Now on to our next step, which is pressing again. I trim off the excess facing material, leaving about 1/2 inch allowance from the opening. Using narrow strips of stretch fusible web, I secure all 4 facing edges to the sleeve by ironing until it is attached securely. I pull off the paper from each strip, then cover the facing and sleeve with parchment paper and press again. I repeat for the other sleeve, and now I can grab a grape, turn a page, and even sew with warm hands. Thank you for watching. Be sure to check out the video links for more sewing tips, techniques, and projects. Until next time.